The Butcher's Masquerade by Matt Dinniman is the wildest, most chaotic book in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series so far. And if you've read any of the other books in this series, then you know that's saying something. Carl's plans to survive the dungeon are even crazier in this book, which makes the stakes even higher than they've been before. And there are so many moving parts in this book that it's almost too much to keep track of, but the characters are so lovable and entertaining that they're sure to keep you invested from the beginning right up until the cliffhanger at the end. Buckle up, book lovers, and let's get into it. As always, because this is book 5 in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series, there will be spoilers in this review. It is just unavoidable, but as always with my reviews, I will put spoiler tags wherever I can, as much as possible, to help you guys out with those spoilers, so just be aware of those. If you have missed my reviews of the previous books in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series, you can catch those here. I will also put a link to those in the description as well to help you guys out. The Butcher's Masquerade follows the story of Carl, Donut, and their fellow crawlers who have reached the 6th floor of the dungeon, which is also known as the hunting grounds, because on top of being another dangerous floor of the dungeon, it is also the floor where outside tourists are allowed in to hunt the crawlers for sport. So not only do Carl, Donut, and their friends have to worry about surviving the dangers of the dungeon on this floor, they also have to worry about aliens who have paid to join the crawl and hunt all the other crawlers just for fun. And on top of that, Carl in particular has made a few very dangerous enemies among all the hunters, to where he is one of the top targets of those hunters, that he has to watch his back, and anyone who is teamed up with him is automatically a target as well. So that's just an added thing that everybody has to watch out for, as if trying to survive the dungeon wasn't already a pain for them as it is. We get to see so much more of Carl in each of these books as the series progresses. Just book by book, we get more of his personality and more of him revealed. He is this character who has made promises to himself. He's made promises to the other crawlers. He's made promises to these innocent NPCs that he sees as bystanders who are just as much victims as the aliens as the crawlers are, to where he has promised to himself that the aliens are not going to break him. He has made promises that he is going to try and save as many crawlers as he can, as many innocent NPCs as he can. He has also promised that he is going to do whatever he can to make the aliens pay. Make the ones pay that are putting them through this show for their entertainment, and are basically using them as reality TV fodder, and they don't care about the lives that they're basically wasting. And he's taking all of this on himself, and willing to take all of the risks and take all the consequences, as long as he knows that the people he cares about are safe. And he's so much more of a complex character than I think anybody ever realized he was going to be when you pick up the first book in this series. I know I never really expected him to be as complex as he is when I picked up the first book. And so I really have enjoyed, and I'm continuing to enjoy, the character progression that we see with Carl as these books and as this series continues. Part of that character complexity with Carl, and part of what has continued to be revealed, is that we also get to see bits and pieces of unresolved trauma from his past and his childhood that is kind of starting to try and come to the surface as he's dealing with trying to survive the dungeon and being in this survival mode, and kind of taking on the pressures of trying to save everybody. And you know, those cracks are starting to come through, and you're starting to see glimpses of that unresolved trauma, and he kind of keeps pushing it down. And it is very worrying to think about how much more he can push it down before it's not going to be able to just stay down. And it is kind of, it's interesting from a character progression standpoint of how that's going to play out in future books as the series progresses. But it does worry me a little bit because you do get so invested in some of these characters that I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen. And I'm a little worried about Carl and how this is going to affect him at the end. But overall, Carl is just a very real and relatable character. And again, it's going to be very interesting to see how all of it plays out in future books as the series moves forward. We also see Carl making a lot of deals in this book with the showrunners and the people, the corporation running the Dungeon Crawler World show that they're a part of. You really get the sense that he's starting to figure out how to walk the fine line of, he's figured out how popular he is and how to kind of play that to his advantage, where he is currently making the company running the Dungeon Crawl show that they're all forced to be a part of a lot of money, to where it's outweighing how much of a nuisance he's being and how much he's kind of screwing things up with a lot of the ways he plans to like solve his problems and get out of things and kind of stick it to them, to where they can't just kill him off because they would lose money because he's so popular, he and Donut. And so he's learning to use that to his advantage, even though he doesn't really like the social aspect and kind of doesn't want to play along with that. That's more Donut's thing. She likes to play into the social image and the views and the viewer count and the favorites and everything like that, and do the interviews and everything. And he still doesn't really like that part, but you see a lot of like backroom deals and negotiating on his part, where he's starting to understand how he can play the game in a way that gets him things that he wants to be able to help fulfill those promises that he's been making and keep himself and the people, the crawlers that he cares about, alive and try to save as many people as possible, which was a really nice dynamic to see. And like I said, we get to see a lot of different layers of Carl and the way the story and the series is working out as these books progress. And it's just been really fun to read and to watch through. So I'm excited to see where it goes from here. At the same time, while it is interesting to see those backroom deals and to see Carl kind of come into his own and realize how valuable he is and how much he can use it to his advantage and leverage, it does make you wonder at what point is his luck going to run out and what's going to happen when that does. So a little bit scary there because, like I said, you get invested. If you're like me and you read and you get invested in these characters, you start to worry about what's going to happen. So I'm in it for the long haul, but I am a little worried the further in I get. So we'll have to see what happens. Masquerade features the return of an elite NPC that we first meet in Carl's Doomsday scenario named Signet. She is part of a sort of TV show within the Dungeon Crawler World show that Carl agrees to help with her quest on the 3rd floor, and then agrees to continue to help her when they reach the 6th floor. This is another example of Carl choosing to use to his advantage his popularity as sort of leverage, because when he agreed to help her on the 6th floor, he was banking on them not wanting to kill him off before they reached the 6th floor, because when he was on the TV show sort of thing with the elite, the ratings went up. So that it was in their best interest to kind of keep him around so that he could come back and boost those ratings again. And it was kind of, further reiteration that like the wheels are turning for him and he's kind of starting to see ways that he can manipulate the system. Which only works until, he's no longer useful, and we'll have to see how that plays out. There are still a ton of crawlers on this 6th dungeon floor, but Matt Dinniman has managed to be able to shift the reader's focus to a smaller ensemble cast out of that larger number of crawlers. There are just a ton of different characters with a ton of different personalities, that there are characters like Katya and Elle who work really well with Carl and Donut, and who are just really funny to read about and have like the back and forth with them, and it's just really fun and enjoyable. But then there are also characters like Pony and Samantha who butt heads with Carl, pun intended, and they have a back and forth that's not always friendly, and but it's also still very enjoyable to read about. Not everyone gets along, but they're all able to work together and come together for that common goal of trying to survive the floor and work together to help some of Carl's crazier plans happen, to help protect everybody and to help to save as many crawlers as possible. And it was really fun to read and get to know a lot of these newer characters as the crawler pool kind of gets smaller and smaller and they're all forced into closer quarters. It was just really nice to kind of have more than just Carl and Donut to really latch onto and get invested with. The downside to that is when you get emotionally invested into these characters is that you have to understand, and I do understand, and I'm starting to really worry a little bit that not everybody is going to be able to survive by the end of this series. So I am getting a little worried. We'll have to see how that goes, because like I said, I'm in it into the end of the series at this point. Just like with some of the other books in this series with strange titles, this title also has a specific reference. In this case, the Butcher's Masquerade refers to an invite-only party at the end of the floor that's reserved for the top 50 ranking crawlers, but they're not the only ones that are invited to the party. The hunters are also invited as well. Overall, I would give The Butcher's Masquerade by Matt Dinniman 4 out of 5 stars. There was a lot going on in this book, and it definitely kept my interest, but it was difficult to keep track of everything at times. This book still had all of the usual chaos and humor that I've come to expect from a dungeon crawler Carl book, as well as the usual cliffhanger ending. I'm not sure how the author is going to tie everything up by the end of the series, and I'm so emotionally invested in a lot of these characters that I'm really kind of worried, because again, I don't know that everybody is going to make it by the end of the series, but I'm also in it until the end of the series, whatever happens, so we'll just have to see. If you've read the rest of the books in this series, then you should obviously check this one out, and if you haven't yet picked up the Dungeon Crawler Carl series, then I don't know what you're waiting for, but you're definitely missing out. And that is it for my review for today. If you guys have read this book and you enjoyed it or didn't enjoy it, you have thoughts on it, please feel free to share those in the comments. I'm always eager to talk with you guys about books that you've liked or disliked, especially in this series, because I just can't get enough of it, and I'm always willing to talk to you guys about it. So definitely share those thoughts with me. As far as what I'm reading this week, I have a bit of a Matt Dinniman double feature for you guys. I have actually started reading Operation Bounce House, by Matt Dinniman, which is his standalone sci-fi novel that came out in February of this year. It finally came up for me on Libby, so I've been listening to that one. This is about Oliver Lewis and his friends who are colonists on the planet of New Sonora, who find themselves fighting for their lives against machines piloted by gamers from Earth. So this is a really interesting story about people who are descendants of Earth who colonized this planet that now they're having to deal with. This company who is willing to let gamers pay to remote pilot these machines to basically kill people on this planet and for money, and like it's very interesting. It's kind of a sci-fi horror sort of thing going on. But it's interesting because I have yet to listen to a Matt Dinniman book, and this is my first foray into an audio by Matt Dinniman, and it's very well done. So I'm very much enjoying it. And if you're a sci-fi fan, if you like Matt Dinniman, if you have read the Dungeon Crawler Carl books, I would definitely recommend checking that out, because it still has the Dungeon Crawler Carl sort of feel and like dynamic with the dialogue and everything in it. So I would definitely recommend checking that one out if you haven't already. For those of you interested in finding out what's next on the channel, be sure to be on the lookout for my review of Gilded Serpent by Danielle L. Jensen. This is book 3 in this author's Dark Shores series, and if you have missed my review of either of the first 2 books in the series, you can catch those here or in the description as well. But this follows the story of, picks up where the previous books in the Dark Shores series left off. It's told in 4 different points of view. It joins the storylines of Dark Shores and Dark Skies, reuniting Marcus and Terriana with Lydia and Killian for the first time since the arrival of the Selendor Empire on the Dark Shores. Now, this is a series that if you have seen my previous reviews of either Dark Shores or Dark Skies, then you know that this is a series that you can either start Dark Shores or Dark Skies as book 1. Either the order suggested reading order says you can read either of those two books first, because they are told with either of these couples as the main characters in either of those books. This one actually joins those 4 together in this storyline, which is really interesting, and it's a different way of telling the story that I really appreciate. And like I said, I have said before, Danielle L. Jensen is a favorite author of mine. I'm a huge fan of her Bridge Kingdom series and her Saga of the Unfated duology. So I am really enjoying this series, and I can't wait to tell you guys more about it. So definitely stay tuned for that review. But that is all that I have for today's video. If you liked anything that you saw in today's video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more content. Otherwise, I will see you next time, and happy reading!